I wasn't looking for proof that afternoon. I was looking for a stapler. Just a simple stapler to organize some documents for work. But when I moved the stack of unpaid bills on my mother's desk, something caught the light. A velvet box. Small, navy blue, the kind that holds promises. My heart started pounding before I even opened it. Something in my gut told me not to touch it, but my hands were already reaching. The hinge creaked as I lifted the lid, and there it was, gleaming under the afternoon sunlight, streaming through the window. The engagement ring. Julian's ring. The one he swore he had bought 3 years ago. The one he claimed was in his jacket pocket when he came to propose. The one that disappeared the night before he was supposed to ask me to marry him. I remember that fight like it was yesterday. He showed up at my apartment devastated, saying someone must have stolen it. I didn't believe him. How could I? He had no receipt, no proof, nothing. I called him a liar. I accused him of getting cold feet and making up an excuse. We screamed at each other until our voices gave out. We broke up 2 weeks later. And now, 3 years later, here it was, in my mother's desk, hidden under bills and old grocery store coupons. But it wasn't just the ring that made my hands shake. It was the small yellow sticky note attached to the box, written in my mother's perfect cursive handwriting, the same handwriting that used to leave me encouraging notes in my lunchbox as a kid, were 5 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. Disposed of. Problem solved. I had to read it 3 times before the words made sense. Disposed of. Like trash. Like something that needed to be eliminated. Problem solved. Like Julian, the man I loved, the man I almost married, was a problem that required a solution. The room started spinning. I sat down hard on the office chair, still clutching the box, my mind racing through every conversation, every moment, every time my mother had comforted me after another failed relationship. He wasn't good enough for you anyway, sweetheart. You deserve better than someone who abandoned you. I'm just glad you found out who he really was before it was too late. She had been there for every heartbreak, every late night cry session, every moment I questioned what was wrong with me. And all along, she was the reason. My breathing became shallow. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront her right then and there. But something stopped me. If she had done this to Julian, what else had she done? How many others? I carefully placed the ring back in the box, positioned it exactly where I found it, and stacked the bills on top the same way they were before. My hands were still trembling, but my mind was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. I stood up, smoothing my shirt, and walked out of that office with a smile on my face. Because I had just learned the most important lesson of my life. The person I trusted most in the world was my greatest enemy. And she had no idea I knew. I took the biscuit, forcing my hand to stay steady, even though everything inside me was screaming. No, I lied, looking her directly in the eyes. I just realized I don't need to staple anything. I need to shred it. For just a fraction of a second, so brief I almost missed it, her smile faltered. Her eyes flickered with something I'd never seen before. Fear. My name is Elena. For 28 years, I've been the perfect daughter. The one who calls every day. The one who brings groceries without being asked. The one who cancelled plans to stay home when mom said she felt a little lonely. I'm the daughter who never moved too far away. Who chose the local college instead of the scholarship across the country because family comes first. who turned down job opportunities in other cities because mom would get that look in her eyes, that wounded, abandoned look that made me feel like the worst person alive. Everyone always told me how lucky my mother was to have me. "Evelyn, you raised such a devoted daughter," the neighbors would say. "You must be so proud," her church friends would gush. Her mom would smile, that warm maternal smile, and pull me close. "She's my everything," she'd say, squeezing my shoulder just a little too tight. I thought that's what love looked like. Sitting on the floor of her office, staring at that velvet box hidden under bills, I realized I'd been living in a cage I didn't even know existed. My mind started racing backward through every relationship I'd ever had. Not just Julian, all of them. There was Marcus in college. We dated for 2 years. He was kind, ambitious, studying to be an architect. He had plans to move to Chicago after graduation, and he wanted me to come with him. I was ready to say yes. Then one day, he just stopped calling. I cried to my mother for weeks. She held me on the couch, stroking my hair. "He was never going to take you to Chicago anyway, sweetheart," she whispered. "Men like that make promises they can't keep. You're better off here with me." Then there was David, sweet, quiet David who worked at the bookstore downtown. We bonded over our love of mystery novels and terrible coffee. He never pressured me for anything. He was patient, gentle. 6 months in, he broke up with me over text. A text. He said he learned some things about me that he couldn't ignore. When I asked what things, he blocked me. Mom took me out for ice cream that night. "Some people just can't handle real intimacy," she said, rubbing my back. "They run when things get too real. It's their loss, baby, not yours." And then there was Julian. Julian with his terrible jokes and his engineering degree. Julian who built me a bookshelf from scratch because he knew I was running out of space. Julian who asked my mother for permission before he even thought about proposing because he wanted to do things right. Julian who showed up at my door 3 years ago, pale and panicked, saying the ring was gone. I close my eyes now and remember that night differently. I remember how quickly Mom had come over when I called her, crying. How she had been the one to suggest that maybe Julian was lying. How she planted that seed of doubt so carefully, so gently, that I thought it was my own idea. "Sweetheart, I hate to say this," she'd whispered, "but what kind of man loses an engagement ring? Either he never bought it or he's not ready to commit. Either way, do you really want to build a life with someone like that?" I had nodded through my tears and she had held me close. "You'll always have me," she'd said. "I'll never leave you." Sitting in our office now, I understood what she really meant. She would never leave me, and she would make damn sure no one else could take me away. I thought about the men after Julian, the dates that went nowhere, the guys who seemed interested until they suddenly weren't. The pattern I'd started to notice, but always blamed on myself. Maybe I'm too intense. Maybe I'm not interesting enough. Maybe I'm just not meant to be with anyone. That's what I told myself. That's what I believed. But it wasn't me. It was never me. It was her, my mother, Evelyn. The woman who baked cookies for the neighborhood kids and volunteered at the church fundraiser. The woman everyone called an absolute saint for raising me alone after Dad died. She wasn't a saint. She was a saboteur. And she'd been destroying my happiness for years, all while playing the role of the supportive, concerned mother. She had been there for every heartbreak, every late-night cry session, every moment I questioned what was wrong with me. I stood up from the floor, my legs shaky, but my resolve hardening like steel. I walked out to the kitchen where Mom was making tea, humming softly to herself. The afternoon light streamed through the lace curtains she'd hung last spring, the ones I'd helped her put up while she talked about how cozy the house was, how we'd made it such a lovely home together.
She looked up when I entered, her face breaking into that familiar, loving smile. "Did you find the stapler, honey?" she asked, holding out a biscuit she'd just pulled from the oven, her signature recipe, the one she made whenever I was upset. I took the biscuit, forcing my hand to stay steady even though everything inside me was screaming.
"No," I lied, looking her directly in the eyes. "I just realized I don't need to staple anything." I paused, watching her carefully. "I need to shred it." For just a fraction of a second, so brief I almost missed it, her smile faltered. Her eyes flickered with something I'd never seen before, fear. She recovered instantly, laughing that soft maternal laugh. "Well, the shredder's in the closet, dear. You know where everything is."
"I do," I said quietly. "I know exactly where everything is." I bit into the biscuit and walked back to my room, feeling her eyes following me down the hallway.
She had no idea what I had found. She had no idea that the daughter who never questioned her, who never pushed back, who always stayed close, was about to become her worst nightmare. Because I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I was going to investigate. I was going to find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. And then I was going to make sure she paid for every single relationship she destroyed. Every single one. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that ring, that note, those 5 words that destroyed everything I thought I knew. But when morning came, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to pretend. I had to be the perfect daughter for just a little longer. Because if she suspected I knew, she'd cover her tracks. Sitting in her office now, I understood what she really meant. She would never leave me, and she would make damn sure no one else could take me away. Then, while cutting my pancakes, I dropped the bait, casual, light, like it meant nothing. I watched the panic flash across her face. She tried to hide it, but I'd spent 28 years learning to read her moods. I knew what came next. I cleared the table and washed the dishes, giving her time to process. Time to panic. Time to start planning whatever sabotage she had in mind. Because I absolutely knew she wouldn't let this go. She'd make her move, and when she did, I'd be ready. I hugged her goodbye, grabbed my bag and left for work. But as I drove away, I wasn't thinking about my presentation. I was thinking about how perfectly she'd taken the bait. What I didn't see was what happened after I left, how she stood in that kitchen for a full 5 minutes completely still. How she walked to her office like a general preparing for war. How she opened that drawer, the same one where I found Julian's ring, and pulled out something even more damning. She made the call before I even reached the office. Calm, professional, practiced. This wasn't her first time. This was a routine she'd perfected over years. But what Mom didn't know was that I had already prepared for this. While she was making her calls, I was making mine. While she was setting her traps, I was building my case. I told Liam everything the day after I found the ring, showed him the evidence, explained the pattern, and instead of running like I thought he might, he got angry, not at me, at her. "Let's expose her," he'd said, "together." We spent every evening that week preparing. I taught him her patterns, her questions, her manipulation techniques. We scripted responses, planned reactions. This wasn't just about catching her in the act. This was about protecting him and finally freeing myself. Claire made her first approach the very next day. Subtle, friendly. Just checking in, she said, but I saw the calculation in her eyes, the practiced casualness of her questions. She reported back to my mother within minutes, exactly as I knew she would. Mom didn't waste time. The moment she got Claire's text, she escalated. If casual observation wouldn't work, she'd go deeper. Background checks, financial records, looking for anything she could use to paint him as dangerous, unstable, or unworthy. While she dug into Liam's past, I prepared my arsenal. Voice recording apps, hidden cameras, cloud backups. Every conversation from now on would be documented. Every manipulation attempt would be recorded. She wanted to investigate? Fine, but she'd become my primary subject.
The week passed in careful performance. We both played our parts. She gathered her ammunition, I gathered mine. Claire kept feeding her information, all of it carefully curated by me. By Saturday morning, Mom thought she had everything she needed to destroy this relationship. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush.
The house looked exactly like it always did. Warm, welcoming, safe. But I knew better now. This wasn't a home. It was a hunting ground. And tonight, the predator thought she had fresh prey. Mom played the perfect hostess through appetizers and into dinner. But I could see it. The way she circled him with questions. What brought you to Abuja? How's your family? What are your intentions? Each question designed to find weakness. But Liam stayed calm. Answered carefully. He wasn't giving her anything to use. After dinner, she made her move. Liam, would you help me with dessert? All sweetness. Elena and I locked eyes. This was it. The moment we'd been waiting for. The moment that kitchen door closed, her mask dropped. Not completely, she was too practiced for that, but enough. I'd positioned myself where I could hear everything, my phone recording every word. That's when I walked in. I'd heard every word, every lie, every threat, every desperate attempt to destroy yet another relationship. But this time was different. This time I had proof. She wasn't expecting that. No one had ever said no before. Marcus left. David blocked me. Julian broke down. But Liam stood there and refused. And now she had to face me. For the first time in my life, I watched my mother scramble. She was always in control, always 3 steps ahead, but not this time. This time, she was caught. I stood up, and for the first time in 28 years, I looked at my mother and saw her clearly. Not the saint everyone believed her to be, not the victim she played so well, just a deeply broken woman who had broken me in return. We walked out of that house, leaving her sobbing on the kitchen floor. I didn't look back, not even once, because for the first time, I wasn't walking away from my future, I was walking toward it. That night, 2 very different stories unfolded. In that house, my mother sat alone in the dark, surrounded by the life she'd built on lies and control. For the first time in decades, there was no one to manipulate, no one to keep captive, just silence, just consequences. Meanwhile, across town, I packed everything I owned, every book, every photograph, every piece of a life I was finally claiming as my own. Liam helped, never asking if I was sure, because he knew. This wasn't impulsive, this was survival. By morning, my apartment was empty, my phone number was changed, and my mother's control was finally, completely broken. I woke up on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by boxes. Everything I owned, everything I was, packed into 12 cardboard containers. My phone had been vibrating since 3 a.m., 47 missed calls, 32 text messages, all from the same blocked number, all from her. I didn't read them. I already knew what they said. The first few would be apologies. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I was overwhelmed. Let's talk. Then they'd shift to guilt. How could you do this to me after everything I've done for you? Finally, they turn to threats. You are making a mistake. You will regret this. You need me. But I didn't need her. That was the truth I'd been too afraid to face for 28 years. Liam stared on the couch. He'd insisted on staying, said he wouldn't let me spend the first night of my freedom alone. I watched him sleep and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Actually safe. Not the false security my mother offered, the kind that came with invisible chains. Real safety. The kind that came from someone who wanted me free, not captive. My flight to Lagos left in 6 hours. One-way ticket. New job already secured through Liam's contacts. New apartment waiting. New life beginning. No forwarding address left behind. No way for her to follow. Just clean, complete separation. I stood up, stretched, and looked around the empty apartment one last time. This place had been my cage, disguised as independence. I'd lived 3 blocks from my mother, close enough for her to drop by unannounced, close enough for her to maintain control while I pretended to be autonomous. Never again. Across town, my mother was discovering the extent of my planning. Every avenue of contact blocked. Phone number disconnected. Social media privacy locked. Email filters set to auto-delete anything from her address. I'd even contacted my workplace, warned them she might try to reach me there. Security protocols in place. She tried calling my aunt, blocked her number too. She tried my old college friends. I'd already told them everything, sent them the recordings. They knew what she was now. She tried the church members she was so friendly with. I'd emailed the pastor that morning. Professional, clinical. I'm relocating for personal safety. Please don't share my information with anyone, including family. She even tried calling Liam. His number was changed before we left the house that night. Every bridge burned, every path blocked, every manipulation tactic rendered useless. I imagined her sitting in that kitchen, the same one where she'd poisoned so many relationships, realizing she had no power anymore. No leverage, no control, just consequences. The recordings sat in 3 separate cloud accounts, shared with my lawyer and 2 trusted friends. If anything happened to me, if she tried anything, they'd be released automatically. Everyone would know. The church, the neighbors, the family members who thought she was a saint, all of them would see the real her. She'd spent years building a reputation as the devoted single mother, the pillar of the community, the woman who sacrificed everything for her daughter. One click, and that reputation would crumble. I wasn't bluffing. She knew I wasn't bluffing. And that's what would keep her away. Not love, not respect, not guilt, just fear. The same fear she'd used to control me for decades. The airport felt like no man's land. Still in Abuja, but not really. Already gone, but not yet arrived. I kept expecting her to appear, to run through the terminal, calling my name, making a scene, forcing me to stay. That's what she would have done years ago when I tried to take the scholarship. She'd shown up at the bus station, crying, clutching her chest, saying she was having heart palpitations. I'd stayed, missed the bus, lost the scholarship. But I was 21 then, easily manipulated, trained to respond to her distress. I was 28 now, and I'd learned the difference between genuine need and manufactured crisis, between love and control, between protection and imprisonment. Security checkpoint felt like crossing a border. She couldn't follow past this point. I exhaled for the first time since leaving her house. At the gate, Liam bought me terrible airport coffee. I had never tasted anything better. We sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs and watched planes take off, and I felt something I didn't recognize at first. It took me several minutes to identify it. Hope. Not the desperate hope I'd had before, that maybe this relationship would work, that maybe she'd let me be happy this time. Real hope, the kind that comes from knowing you're finally on the right path. The boarding call came. I stood, grabbed my carry-on, took one last look at the city where I'd spent my entire life, where I'd been slowly suffocated by someone who claimed to love me. Then I walked down that jetway toward the plane, toward Lagos, toward Liam, toward myself, the person I'd never been allowed to become. By afternoon, my mother had called everyone. Aunt Marie told her, "You did this to yourself, Evelyn. I warned you years ago." The church friends suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Claire, the co-worker she'd paid to spy on me, actually laughed. She told me everything, sent me the recordings. "I'm disgusted I ever helped you." Her community, the one she'd carefully cultivated, the reputation she meticulously maintained, was crumbling. Because I'd done exactly what I promised. I'd sent the recordings to key people. Not everyone, just enough. In small towns and close communities, word spreads fast. She walked through the house like a ghost, every room a reminder. My childhood bedroom preserved exactly as I left it when I moved out at 23. She'd insisted I keep it in case I ever needed to come home. I see now it was insurance, a shrine to her control. She sat on my old bed, holding the stuffed elephant I'd slept with as a child, the one she'd bought me when I was 5, when she was a real mother, before Dad died, before grief twisted her love into something possessive and poisonous. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered Julian's face when I accused him of lying about the ring. Marcus walking away confused and hurt. David blocking me without explanation. All the relationships she destroyed. All the happiness she stole. All the years she controlled me under the guise of protection. She'd done this to herself. Every choice, every manipulation, every lie. This loneliness was her creation, her consequence, her cage, the one she'd built while keeping me in mind. The difference? I'd escaped. She never would, because her cage was internal, built from her inability to let go, to trust, to love without controlling. Some prisons have no locks because the prisoner builds the walls themselves. Lagos at night looked like possibility. Millions of lights spreading to the horizon. Each one a person living their life, free to make their own choices, their own mistakes, their own happiness. Our apartment was small, but ours. 10th floor, city view, no memories attached. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, each item placed with intention. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't proximity to someone else's control. This was home, actually home. Liam was setting up the kitchen, singing off-key. He did that when he was happy. I'd learned so many small things about him in the weeks since finding that ring. Things I never got to learn about Julian, Marcus, or David because she'd poisoned everything too quickly. My new phone buzzed. Job confirmation. Start date in 3 days. Position she didn't choose. Career path she hadn't approved. Life she couldn't influence. I stepped onto the balcony. The air felt different here. Lighter. Or maybe that was just me, finally able to breathe without measuring every breath against someone else's expectations. "You okay?" Liam asked, joining me. "I keep waiting for the guilt," I admitted, for feeling bad about leaving her alone. "And?" "Nothing. I just feel free." He put his arm around me. Not possessive, not controlling, just present. "That's because you finally are." Below us, Lagos lived, moved, breathed, and so did I. For the first time in 28 years, I was exactly where I chose to be, with someone who wanted me whole, not broken, strong, not dependent, free, not captive. My phone was silent. My mother couldn't reach me, couldn't manipulate, couldn't destroy. She was alone with her choices now, and I was alone with mine. The difference? Mine led to freedom. Hers led to consequences. I'd spent my whole life being the perfect daughter. Tonight, I was just Elena. Finally, completely, just Elena. And that was enough. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after I'd left Abuja. Cream cardstock, gold embossing, my name in elegant calligraphy. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent years destroying my happiness. Like I hadn't walked out of her life completely. You are cordially invited to celebrate Evelyn's 60th birthday. The audacity was breathtaking. After 47 unanswered calls, after changing my number, after explicitly telling her I was done, she sent a birthday invitation. As if we were still playing the game. As if I'd show up, smile, and pretend. But as I read it, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just an invitation. It was an opportunity. She was gathering everyone, the family who adored her, the church friends who praised her, the neighbors who thought she was a saint, everyone who believed her version of events, everyone who'd whispered about poor Evelyn whose daughter abandoned her. Are you actually considering this? Liam asked, reading my face. I looked at the invitation again, at the guest list she'd included. Aunt Marie would be there, the church congregation, her book club friends, the neighbors, all the people who'd watched me grow up under her control and never noticed. She wants to play perfect family in front of everyone, I said slowly. She wants them to see me show up, prove she's still in control, that I came back. So don't go, don't give her that satisfaction. But I was already thinking bigger, darker. She wanted an audience. Fine, she would get one. But this time, the performance would be mine. I picked up the RSVP card and checked, will attend. Liam stared at me. Elena, what are you planning? I smiled. For the first time since finding that ring, I felt something close to vengeance. Not the hot, angry kind, the cold, calculated kind. I'm planning to give her exactly what she asked for. A family gathering with all her loved ones present and the truth. I spent the week preparing like a lawyer, preparing for trial. Every piece of evidence organized. Every timeline documented. Every lie catalogued with proof of the truth. This wasn't going to be an emotional outburst. It wasn't going to be a screaming match she could dismiss as Elena having an episode. This would be clinical, professional, irrefutable. I created a presentation, simple slides, dates, facts, evidence, the ring with the note, screenshots of her payment to Claire, text message records showing her coordination with my exes, the fake medical documents she'd shown Liam, cross-referenced with my actual medical records showing I'd never been diagnosed with anything. Liam helped me organize the audio recordings. Not all of them, that would take hours. Just the most damning ones. Her telling Liam I was violent, her confessing to stealing the ring, her admitting she'd paid people to sabotage my relationships. 45 seconds each, devastating in their clarity. What if she tries to shut you down? Liam asked. It's her party, her house. She won't, not immediately, because the moment I start, everyone will want to know where this is going. Curiosity will keep them listening, and by the time she realizes what's happening, it will be too late. I'd invited 3 people of my own. Aunt Marie, who already knew everything and had agreed to support me. My old college roommate who'd witnessed my relationship with Marcus. And Julian, yes, Julian. I'd called him, explained everything, asked if he wanted closure. He said yes immediately. The USB drive contained backups. If she destroyed my laptop,
If she cut the power, if she tried anything, I had copies. Multiple people had copies. This truth wasn't going to be buried again. I tried on my outfit, professional dress, modest jewelry. I wanted to look stable, composed, credible, everything she'd claimed I wasn't.
The house looked exactly the same. Same hydrangeas in the front garden, same lace curtains in the windows, same mask of perfection hiding the rot underneath. But I was different. I wasn't the daughter who left 3 months ago, broken and desperate. I was the woman who'd rebuilt herself, and I was here to finish what she started. Evelyn answered the door. For a split second, just one, her mask slipped. I saw panic, fear. Then she recovered, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. Elena, you came. Oh, sweetheart, I've missed you so much. The performance was immediate, loud enough for guests to hear. The devoted mother reunited with her wayward daughter. I stepped back from the embrace. Hello, mother. Happy birthday. She tried to pull me aside toward the kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd poisoned Liam with lies. I planted my feet. We should stay with your guests. It's your party after all. Her eyes narrowed. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't figure out what. Not yet. The living room was full. 30, maybe 40 people. Church friends, neighbors, extended family. Everyone dressed nicely, eating her food, celebrating her life, all of them believing her lies. I saw Aunt Marie by the fireplace. She gave me the smallest nod. Julian stood near the back, looking nervous but determined. My college roommate, Sarah, was setting up her phone to record. We'd coordinated everything. Evelyn was watching me carefully now, trying to read my intentions. I smiled at her, not warm, not cold, just patient. Shall I help you cut the cake later? I asked sweetly. I'd love to make a toast. That's when she realized, whatever I was planning, it was public. It was today, and she couldn't stop it. I waited until after she blew out the candles. Let her have that moment, the singing, the applause, the spotlight. Then I stepped forward with my glass raised. I'd like to make a toast to my mother. Everyone smiled, raised their glasses, expecting something sentimental. Evelyn looked wary but couldn't refuse without seeming ungracious. I connected my laptop to her TV, the same TV we'd watched movies on throughout my childhood, the same TV she'd used to show me family photos and home videos. Now it would show something else, the truth. My mother is an incredible woman, I began. She's dedicated her life to me, sacrificed everything, she says. And it's true, she has given up a lot. She gave up honesty, integrity, my happiness. The first slide appeared, the truth about Evelyn. Confused murmurs. Evelyn stood, tried to move toward the TV. Aunt Marie stepped in her path. The room was watching now, curiosity overcoming confusion. I clicked to the next slide. Photo of Julian's engagement ring, the sticky note clearly visible. Evelyn's handwriting unmistakable to anyone who knew her. 3 months ago, I found this in my mother's desk. It's my ex-fiancé's engagement ring, the one that disappeared 3 years ago and destroyed our relationship. She stole it. She wrote this note, disposed of, problem solved. Dead silence. I clicked again. Timeline of my relationships, each one ending abruptly, dates highlighted. Every relationship I've had has ended the same way, suddenly, mysteriously. The men always saying they learned something about me. Want to hear what she told them? I played the audio. Evelyn's voice filled the room, telling Liam I was unstable, violent, dangerous.
45 seconds of damning evidence. Her voice, her words, undeniable. Gasps! Someone dropped a plate.
The party ended in 10 minutes. Guests made excuses, gathered coats, fled. They'd come to celebrate. They'd witness a reckoning instead. The church friends, the ones who'd praised her devotion, left without saying goodbye. The neighbors who'd called her a saint avoided eye contact. Even distant family members made quick exits. I packed my laptop slowly. Let her watch me. Let her see that I wasn't running this time. I was living on my terms, with evidence secured, with truth told, with dignity intact. Aunt Marie hugged me tight. "You did the right thing," she whispered. Someone needed to stop her. Julian approached. "Thank you," he said, "for finally giving me answers, for showing me I wasn't crazy." I replied, "You deserved the truth. They all did." Evelyn stood in the center of her living room, surrounded by half-eaten cake and abandoned champagne glasses. Her perfect party, her perfect image, all destroyed in 15 minutes. "Elena, please," she called as I headed for the door. "Don't leave like this. We can talk. We can fix this." I paused, turned, looked at her one last time. "There's nothing to fix, Mother. You broke it years ago. I just finally stopped pretending it wasn't broken." We drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw her standing in the doorway, small, alone, exactly what she'd been so desperate to avoid. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to keep me close, she'd guaranteed I'd leave. In trying to control everything, she'd lost everything. 6 months later, I got a message from Aunt Marie. "Your mother moved. Smaller house, different church. She's alone now, completely." I deleted the message. Some endings don't need updates. Some chapters close completely. Some people face consequences and never learn. That wasn't my problem anymore. I was in Lagos. I was happy. I was free. And I was finally, completely just Elena.